Well, hello, everybody, and welcome. It's Balticon again, and I'm thrilled to be here. We are talking about collaborating in a shared universe. And before we dive into that, I'd love to have my esteemed panelists introduce themselves, please. Starting with Jeannie.
Oh, I like being esteemed at 10 o'clock in the morning.
It's better than just steamed. I mean, you know.
That's true. I'm Jeannie Adams. I write urban fantasy, paranormal romantic suspense, and space adventure with my friend Nancy Northcott. And I am a member of Continual on Facebook and YouTube.
And Doc.
Good morning. I'm Doc Coleman at 10 in the morning. I'm more esteemed over than esteemed, but I'm a steampunk author. I write steampunk comedy adventure. And that's about as much bio as I've got at 10 in the morning.
Making words is so hard.
Either it comes or it doesn't.
That's very, very true. Danielle?
I'm Danielle Ackley-McPhail, author, editor, publisher of eSpec Books. I have worked on several collaborations, including Pangea and Jeff Sturgeon's Last Cities of Earth. And I'm best known for my collaboration with Day Al-Muhammad, Baba Ali, and the Clockwork Djinn.
And I'm Gail C. Martin and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic fantasy, urban fantasy, near future post-apocalyptic fiction, and more. And as Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. I do 3 collaborative series with my husband, Larry N. Martin, and 2 of those are extensions of series by John Hartness. Our Spell, Salt, and Steel series is a tie-in to his Bubba the Monster Hunter series, and our Joe Mack Adventures is a tie-in to his Quincy Harker Demon Hunter series. And then on the Morgan side, my most recent novel, Haven, it was part of the Magical Emporium series. And prior to that, Imaginary Lover was part of the Beyond the Realms Imagined series, all of which were shared universes in one way or another. So, and I've been part of Jeannie's Haven Harbor shared universe for a Christmas, for a Trick or Treat novella, and then we are both in the Canon Castle shared universe, which is a holiday themed romance anthology collection. So yeah, a lot of sharing going on around here. So why do authors like to be part of shared universes? Doesn't everybody want to wrap their arms around their own little world and hold it tightly? Danielle?
I think there's 2 things at play here. One, with a shared universe, a lot of the work's already done. You don't have to figure out the mechanics, the world around you. It already exists. You just get to go in and play. And also, you're reaching a different audience than those that are just looking for your work. It's the audience of the universe, which is much broader. So it gives you a lot more reaching out to other audiences.
What about you, Doc? What makes you decide to say yes to a shared universe?
Sometimes it's a universe that I really love, like the Cross of Colombo, which I wrote for the Ministry of Peculiar Occurrences universe. It's just I'm a big fan of T and Pet's work, and I love the universe. And when I had the chance to write for it, I went for it. When Scott Roche asked me to write for his Way of the Gun anthology, though, that was something that he was doing that was completely new. And the story that I wrote, The Shining Cog, which if I lean the other way, you can see part of it. Yeah, that's not working. Anyway, I had a chance to take the framework of a universe that he'd laid out, and I was able to take one part of it and flesh it out for everybody else. Because Scott knew that I was into steampunk. He'd created a group of people called the Followers of the Clockworker, and he imagined it as more of a philosophical group than a religion And I dove into it and I say, no, this is a full-fledged religion. These people have revivals and everything. And in the process of doing that, I ended up defining at least 5 other religious beliefs in his universe. So sometimes
you said you created a group. My mind went to a Facebook group, and then you said it became a full-fledged religion, and I thought I've been in some that kind of went that way.
Yeah, but sometimes things, you get an opportunity and things just gel, and something wonderful comes out of it that if you were building the whole world by yourself, you couldn't necessarily do.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense, Jeannie?
Well, I think that's a great point, Doc, because I've been in a number of anthologies where it's just a, concept. So everybody write about mistletoe. I've also written in one where it was meant to read like a novel, but there were 4 different authors taking different points of view through a hotel in the middle of a hostage crisis. Mm-hmm. I've written shared worlds with Gail and Nancy and several other people in terms of the Canaan Castle romance anthologies. And then Nancy and I do the Outcast Station together. And for me, one of the biggest things is the shared creativity. I mean, on one hand, as Doc's talking about, if you jump into someone else's world, you've got some outline you don't have to do. You can just go play. For me, part of the joy is really going and playing and set up this entire chessboard and then see what people do with it. And it's super fun. I keep telling people when we talk about Outcast Station that it's just so much stinking fun. And Nancy kind of rolls her eyes because I don't think she thinks it's as fun as I do.
It's fun.
It's fun.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of it. You've all hit so many good points. Certainly getting to play in a different sandbox that you don't have to do all the world building for is fun. And getting to play with the other authors, I think that's one of the biggest things, is how much I've gotten to know the other authors that I've been playing with, because we have to talk to each other. We have to communicate. We have to bounce even trivial things off each other so that the stories all work together. And that becomes very collegial, saying, well, what about this? Oh, you have a better idea. Yeah, we can run with that. And it just builds some wonderful relationships. Danielle's right about it hitting a broader audience, because you're now bringing in everybody's audience to see what's going on. And people who like your contribution to the shared world are very likely to follow you home, so to speak, and look at your other books, which is a wonderful thing. I think it also kind of gives me some nostalgia, because back in high school, I cut my teeth writing fan fiction. And, we don't always phrase it as a shared world thing, but that's exactly what we're doing, is we're coming in and writing stories with someone else's world and character, which is a terrific way to learn how to write. And it's only one step removed, a very big step, of being official and authorized and paid, from the same concept of writing media tie-in, which is where they give you a contract to do that. And it's all, legit. So it's all different
and
flavors of
the
thing. And they pay you sometimes. So it's all different flavors of the same thing, but it comes down to it's fun to play with other people.
It's also neat to when it is an existing franchise, to fanboy out and really get to enjoy something that you're a fan of and contribute to it.
Yeah, that's a terrific thing.
And sometimes, like Doc was saying, it gives you a chance to explore something that the authors didn't have an expertise in and so glossed over, or that was just not a rabbit trail they went down. And you get to go down it, and then everybody goes, "Oh, never thought about that in this world. That's pretty cool."
Yeah, and it really depends on who's running the shared world and how they choose to run it. Because part of the reason why I got to do so much with the Shining Cog was because when Scott was setting up that anthology to introduce this shared world, he kind of partitioned each of the authors off. So we ran things by Scott, but we didn't necessarily talk to each other, so we didn't have that same kind of collegiate collaboration. But we did have things like a wiki to keep ourselves consistently organized on the broader picture. So there's a spectrum of interaction that goes on there, but at least you're going to be interacting with whoever owns that world.
Yeah.
Well, and there's also a scale of how much collaboration is going on at any given time. I'm thinking about the fairly small collaborations, like some of the ones Jeannie and I have done, where it might be 4 to 6 or 7 authors, and that's pretty manageable. And then you look at the big sprawling things like the 1632 universe that Eric Flint runs, and it's got its own subgenres and time periods, and it's massive. I get lost just talking to them about the whole project because it's huge. And I don't know how they stay on top of it. I don't know how anybody can, but it's gigantic. And that is exactly what I thought of when you said about the rabbit holes, because all of those little offshoots in that universe is going down those rabbit holes and picking your own hole and chasing it. And that's fantastic. Now, what are some of the difficulties of writing in a shared universe? No matter how enthusiastic you are about doing it, it's still work. You've still got to get it right. Jeannie?
Well, I saw the question that popped up in the Q&A, and it actually speaks to this. So what happens when people break the rules in your sandbox? Well, I created a world in Haven Harbor, which is my Witches Walk series, which is paranormal romance. And I've invited a couple other people to play upon occasion. And you have to set those rules up front, or you lose friendships, and you lose potential great collaborators if you don't set the rules up front, because it's also my baby. It's my creation. It's my world. I don't want somebody messing with it in a way that I don't want that to go that direction. And so there has to be a lot of open communication when you talk about how to do this. And there's also, you got egos, you got issues, you got people who say, oh yeah, I'll do it. And then they skate in at the last minute and go, what was I supposed to do again? And that can be really, really problematic. So I think a lot of times you have to be clear up front about what you want and what deadlines are. And all that has to really be laid out before you kind of jump in with anybody. And you kind of have to know who you're dealing with.
Yeah, I agree completely. Doc?
You also have to kind of have a feeling for how hard and hard and fast are your rules.
Yeah.
And if somebody goes and breaks one of your rules, you need to step back and take a look at it and say, does this work? Does this make the real rule something other than what I originally thought? And do I need to change things, or do I need to turn around and give editorial guidance to this author because it's my world, and they're breaking my rules? And if you can't find a way to make it work, then you say, I'm sorry, I appreciate the work you put into it, but I can't use this like it is, and you drop them out of the anthology. But I don't know. One of the principles that I usually run on is that the way the world is not what it looks like. So I love finding rules and finding ways to break rules, because there's always an interesting story attached. But I can usually find a bigger way to look at things so that I can make it work. And at the end of the day, it's always, can you make it work?
Okay, Danielle?
I think one of the biggest challenges, I was working with John Betancourt on a shared universe he was trying to create called The World of the Silver Moon. And in the universe, he had set characters that anyone could use in addition to their own. And I think the challenge there is when you have people or elements of the universe that different authors see different ways. And so you don't get the continuity that you're looking for. And if you have a group of authors that take direction well, that's good, because you can, in the editorial pass, you can kind of shape things so that they come together and the continuity is there. but when there's egos involved, that can be problematic. So maintaining the continuity and the feel. When I was working on Pangea, I was a pitch hitter, you could say. Somebody had to drop out. So I came to it late to the game. And pretty much I had what Bible they had, but most of this was just what I came up with to fit what the editor was looking for. So I could kind of get around it like that. And then he came in and dropped in details to add that continuity. And that was cool. But that's where the tension comes into it and trying to make the worlds work.
Can I answer that? Can I answer that question from
Yes,
a different
please.
perspective? So I actually answered it from the perspective of the person who created the world, because in two cases, both Outcast Station and the Canon Castle, I was part of who built the world. But from the perspective of someone who's also gone and played in someone else's sandbox, I think you have to be, as an author, really respectful of their sandbox.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, let them do, as it's Danielle said, add their things and shape the story a little bit if necessary to make it fit, and step back from your ego and that's really challenging sometimes. But if you're going to play in somebody else's world, it is their world. And so I wanted to answer it from that perspective, because I really did answer it from the perspective of I am in control of this world.
Well, that was kind of the way it was asked. And
Well, that's true. But
I got to admit, I was referring to the Shining Cog earlier, and it's like Scott very, very much said, there are no religions in this world. These are basic philosophies that people follow. And when I started working with it, I changed it into religions. They weren't zealous religions, but they were very definitely religions. But I ran it back to him. He went with it, and I broke the rules, but he approved of the way that I broke it, and that was his right, because it was his will.
And I think that makes it an incredibly important point, which is, if it's truly collaborative, then the world builder has some flexibility there to adjust those rules, change those rules, say, wow, it's a really good idea. I never thought of it, but run with it. And ideally, you'd like to see that kind of flexibility as a true collaboration, and not just, I'm farming this stuff out for you guys to write, which is a very different feeling. I think the difficulty can come in just trying to chase down those details and make sure that they are right. With our Christmas at Cannon Castle story, we had to nail down where the darn Christmas trees were so they didn't move all over the landscape. Somebody had them to the left. No, they're to the right. So then you have these moving 30-foot Christmas trees. That would be bad. So we had to nail down little tiny details like that. But the devil is in the details. I think one of the biggest things for the writer, coming at it from the writer's side, is having a very clear series Bible. Especially if the more complicated the world, the more clear the series Bible needs to be. I nearly did a tie-in with a major gaming company. We spent 9 months nailing down an extremely detailed outline. It got blessed up and down the chain. I wrote the book exactly to the detailed outline, but there was no series Bible, even though I had read everybody else's book. And when I turned it in, it went to a different editor, because the editor who had commissioned this had moved on, who came back and said, this imaginary creature would never do that. There was no series Bible to tell me that. I don't know how she knew that, because they are imaginary, but it was wrong. And we ended up amicably separating at that point, because there were irreconcilable differences. And it was because there was no series Bible. There was no absolute place to go back and say, yes, that imaginary character would see, it's right here on page 55, line 6. It was, well, that's not my interpretation. Okay. You can't expect your writers to read your mind, I guess is what I'm saying, if you're the one building the world.
Go ahead.
The
thing is that it depends on the scale of the shared world. with the Way of the Gun, the shared world was the West, and that was a large place where people could put their story so that it wouldn't overlap. With the Ministry of Peculiar Occurrences, it was the world. So you could set your story anywhere else as long as you weren't overlapping somebody else. You didn't really have to worry much about what they did as long as you followed a few basic rules. In Paradise Found, this is set in the intersection of all afterlives and all of time. So it's like, you know, have fun, adventures with gods in the afterlife. So big, wide open spaces for you to play with. You know, if you've got something that is like set in a particular borough of London in a time period, you really need that story Bible. But if you're on a big scale, you can get away with a lot without having one.
I think those are the, sorry.
No.
I think those are the ones that really work the best, because the authors can take key landmarks that people will recognize and then have fun. And it just makes for a more richer, varied world, but it still has the earmarks of that universe.
Yeah, it depends on how tightly integrated all of the adventures are going to be. So, for example, with the Spell, Salt, and Steel world, which is a spinoff of John Hartness's Bubba the Monster Hunter, we had the discussion about, can vampires fly? No, vampires cannot fly in that world, although in My Deadly Curiosities world, they can hover. Okay, good to know that, because there are like 8 of us all writing in this world, and we need to know if we have flying or non-flying or hovering or non-hovering vampires. So
only authors get in those kind of discussions.
So can a vampire with a fan fly? No.
as long as it's not under his own power.
Okay.
But those are fairly tightly integrated in that they do exist in the real world, and there are cross references. So that makes a difference. And honestly, all of my modern fiction as Gail and Morgan all interact. So I guess I have my own large shared, one of my fans called it a Martin cinematic universe. Sorry, Martin. But it all intersects. And so now you've got to keep your own stuff straight from book to book and series to series. Going, no, I said I couldn't do that because I can't do that. I can yell at the showrunner, but it's me.
Get a mirror.
And start the camera. No.
Yes. We talked about some of the benefits of doing shared universes, but what's some of the plain old fun of doing it? Doc? Or is there fun?
There can be endless. I mean, the Paradise Found story I did was one of my favorites, because I took characters from my Crackle and Bang universe and I threw them in the afterlife, and I have them trading barbs with gods, and it's like, this is something I couldn't work into a normal Crackle and Bang story. So I got to open up a whole new dimension, and because it's also not bound by time, I've then hooked it back into my novels. So I'm in the second and third novels, I'm going to write additional hooks that refer to this story, and it's like, that's going to be fun for the readers because it's bonus material to see if they can pick out where those things tie in. And it's fun for me to do just because it's cool.
Danielle?
Just creating in general is fun, whether it's my sandbox or somebody else's sandbox. I do the same thing that you do. There's always Easter eggs for my other works that if the reader reads everything, they're going to pick up on them, but it's just a background detail. But it's creating something that's alive and that you can potentially pull together into a whole new cool project later. So I always look for those opportunities, even when I'm playing in other people's worlds. If it has a clause where the characters I create are mine, then it's a whole other dimension of what I can develop later for myself. So.
How about you, Jeannie?
Oh, I'm the Energizer Bunny bouncing in my seat going, this is so much stinking fun, because I'm an extrovert in an introverted job. So when I get to collaborate with people, woohoo, I get to talk to the real humans. And so for me, creating the world together is just that much more interesting, expansive. I mean, the Canon Castle series we did Christmas at Canon Castle, Trick or Treat at Canon Castle, and then this year will be the New Year's one. And every one of the 7 people involved in that brought something to the table that made the world bigger and richer. And some of them are paranormal and some of them aren't. So some of the ones that aren't paranormal, they're blithely going about their business, ignoring anything else, and just
Ghost?
like,
What ghost?
yes, exactly. And I didn't hear that thumping, did you?
Must be the pipes.
Must be the pipes. It's a castle. It's old.
Right.
So that, and then,
goes thump in the castle.
exactly. So, and in the shared world I do with Nancy, we have so much fun going back and forth and going, hey, I just created a creature. Do you mind? I stuck it in the Bible. You can go look at it. If you want to use it, fine. Help yourself. But she's always like, will you stop with the creatures? Because I can't keep them. And I'm in the cantina, and going, oh, look, there goes another one. And so for me, it is just this huge basket of kittens. It's just so much fun. And like Danielle said, you can, and Doc too, you can refer to these in your other works, or you can Easter egg in that work some of your other work. And that's part of the big fun too. I mean, like I said, bouncing the seat going, wow, let's do this again. This is so much fun.
Yeah, finding those Easter eggs as a reader when I'm reading somebody else's world is like being in on the in joke. It's wink, wink, nod, nod. I see what you did there. And I love that as a reader. So I love to drop those Easter eggs for the readers. And you have to write them so that if you don't know the other series, it doesn't stick out. But if you do, it's twice as much fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, the fun is seeing if in every book we can write something that makes John Hartness snort his Mountain Dew out his nose laughing. And with an arrangement now that he tells me when he reaches that point in the manuscript. But he also thinks Eric Asher and Larry and I have a competition to see who can come up with the weirdest monsters that are indigenous to the area that we write about, because we're doing urban legends. And it's kind of an unofficial competition, but we lived in places with very weird monsters, so it's kind of fun. Oh, nobody's ever heard of this one. How can we write it into a story? Now, we talked a little bit about this, but I'd like to dive a little deeper in what kind of attitude or self-knowledge do you need about yourself to know if doing a shared world is right for you to participate in? And maybe what kind of awareness do you need to have of yourself to know if you're really cut out to run a shared universe? Danielle?
For me, I am stretched very thin, and I know that. So I don't tend to pursue shared worlds. I'll participate if someone asks me to, but like I said, I'll pick a few little elements that set the setting, and then I'll just tell my story. And if they want to make it canon, great. If not, it was fun playing. As far as running one, I think I would obsess too much. If I'm particular about details, then, I don't know that I have time to make an exhaustive Bible, but that's where I would go if I was doing it.
So you'd have a 4-inch thick Bible before you ever put out bids for people to write.
And nobody would read it.
Jeannie?
Well, Gail already knows I love story Bibles.
And maps.
I have them in Excel. I love maps. I have them in Excel. I have them in Word. I've drawn the maps. I have floor plans. So I did one anthology, the one that was supposed to read like a novel, where I did the floor plans for this hotel where this big terrorist event was going to happen. And the author that skidded in on the last minute said, where can I find these online? I've got to look at the hotel exterior. And I'm like, not real. But I think you have to have certainly flexibility. You have to be willing to, if an author like Doc says, well, I want to make this a religion as opposed to just a philosophy, you have to sort of think that out and go, okay, fine, run with it. Nothing in this particular world is canon yet regarding that. So rock on, you go create it. Or say, no, that's already kind of been done and I don't want to go there. Or I think you have to have some internal fortitude to be the one who runs it. Mm-hmm. And some pretty clear ideas of where you want it to go. And then from the perspective, again, of somebody coming into that world, you have to be willing to hear no and accept it. Because like Doc said, I've been in the situation where somebody has said, this just really doesn't fit what I laid out, and thank you for the story, and you go, no harm, no foul, right? You have to be willing to not get your feelings hurt about that and just.
Yeah. I think that brings up a good point that you need boundaries too, because authors have all different thresholds of where they're willing to go and what they want to pursue. And if it doesn't fit the goal of your universe, the type of things that you want to represent, then that could be an issue.
Yeah.
Doc?
Yeah. We've kind of underscored it. You definitely need to have flexibility because, and I'm coming at this from someone being invited to write in somebody else's world because I have not run a shared world yet. But you've got to be willing to make your story fit their world, and you can't have a big ego where you pitch your story and they agree to it and you write it all out and send it in and they come back and say, okay, this doesn't work, this doesn't work, this doesn't work, you have to change those. You can't get upset about that. You're not exactly writing the spec, but you've got to be willing to make it fit. And you can't have a big ego. You've got to be willing to sacrifice those darlings because they're not really your darlings. They're shared custody darlings. But you've also got to be willing to find interesting takes on things, because you're working in a shared world. It's not just I like this idea, but it's like, what are everybody else's ideas? Am I duplicating somebody else? Can I find something unique to put into my story to differentiate it? That makes this more interesting. That gives it a twist. And now there's a possibility that I might do a shared world in the Crackle and Bang universe at some later time, if people want to spin off some of the characters or just write against the backdrop. But so far, it's been very much focused on my main characters, and it's like those people I want to have control over. And that's the whole reason I self-published the thing, was to make sure I had control over it.
Right.
So you've, I believe Danielle mentioned that you've got to know your boundaries and respect other people's boundaries, but you've also got to understand what's important to you in terms of the property and where you're willing to let people play if you're going to go and open up a shared world.
Yeah, I think that flexibility, that kind of moving the ego aside to say, well, how are we going to do this on both sides, is really important, and being open to good ideas from both directions. I think one of the things I appreciate the most when I'm working in someone else's shared universe, and as I said, other than my own, I haven't run a shared universe, but I've seen it done well and not so well. And when it's done well, the organizer invests the time to make sure everybody has everything they need and answers as many questions as possible up front so that we don't end up in a snarl later on. And I think back to the situation that I ran into with the potential tie-in. If there had been a series Bible, we could have, that situation never would have happened, because I would have known how that imaginary creature would have acted and I would never have deviated from it. So as the organizer, you don't want to waste the time of the people who have agreed to come play in your sandbox. And if you don't give them good information, expecting them to then rewrite a story is very arrogant. You give them good information up front, they'll do it close to right the first time. Give them no information, it's not their fault if they don't hit a mark.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And the collaboration I just came off of, the Magic Emporium series, our fearless leader, Megan Maslow, was so organized. We had all these documents in the Facebook group that said, here's how we're doing the branding. Here's how we're doing the shared element. Here is what you can and what you can't do. She anticipated everything, which was a huge amount of work on her part. But then when we got to those points, nobody got lost. Nobody was confused. Nobody was headed off in the wrong direction, because she had not only thought about it, but they were all posted in a group place, and we had those at our fingertips. So if you're going to run one of these, you got to do right by your authors and have that kind of organization. And if you're the author, you have to go check those documents and make sure you know everything they put out there for you so that you get it right. Danielle, did you have anything to add on that? You looked like you were waiting to add something.
One of the things that I do to make sure I don't get caught in one of those snarls, mostly when it's like a short story collection, is I asked the editor what they wanted to see that they're not seeing yet. And I let them guide my creative inspiration. So for Pangea, he wanted a story featuring a chef. Which fortunately I watch a lot of Food Network, so I was right on that. But it was a very different take that I wouldn't have thought to pursue otherwise, but really came up with a really dynamic story that fit in the universe. He sprinkled in the specifics that made it fit, and I got to play in the world. So
yeah. This kind of goes into a question in the Q&A from Jack Carroll. He says, I've actually had to compile Bibles for story series I've collaborated on in the 1632 universe. Usually they're word processor docs compiled from email threads. Sometimes they're tables of characters or timelines. You really need to think about how you're going to organize all this stuff, because story Bibles can grow exponentially, and so much so if you've got other people contributing to it at the same time. You've not only got to be able to have everything together, you have to have it organized so that someone can go and find specific information quickly and easily.
Which is absolutely wonderful if you have somebody who is inclined to create a wiki for you.
Yeah, if you have an army of fans who will maintain your wiki, you're golden.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I do it for like Canem and for the Outcast Station. That's why I do it both in Word and in Excel in a spreadsheet. Some people's brains work well with Excel, and there are like 20 sheets on the Canem Castle Excel spreadsheet. Gail's like, oh Lord, there's more to look at. But that's everything from how the castle looks and who everybody has mentioned as being working at the front desk, to what the rooms look like, to the path through the Christmas trees. And I mean, this is a big castle, it's a hotel. And so you're right, Doc. I think you have to think it through, like Gail was saying, Megan did. If you're the one creating the story Bible, which I like doing it, so I usually get to do it, you end up having to step back and think, okay, if I were writing a story in this world cold, what would I need to know?
And even then, sometimes with all that information, it's possible to read it and misinterpret it. Like the time I put 2 floors in the wrong building, and Jeannie had to come back and gently say, no, they're not in Tower A, they're in Tower B. Now, that wasn't a big thing to change, not like the Christmas trees, but you know, it had to be right, which brings me to the next question, and it's very tied in here, which is the whole concept of canon consistency. Some of that rests on the author, but a lot of it rests on the world builder to oversee that consistency and make sure that you're not saying something's impossible in book 1 and then it's the rule of the realm in book 13. So as somebody writing Herd, how do you make the time in your own schedule to enforce that canon consistency? I know one of my pet peeves with TV shows is when it seems like the writers have never watched the show and suddenly they're doing something that has been a long time thing you couldn't do. And that throws me out of the story, whether it's written or watched. So any thoughts on that? How you build that into your schedule to maintain that canon consistency as the world grows larger and larger? Somebody want to jump in on that?
Well, I think if you're the one who created the universe, you have to put it in your contract or your memorandum of understanding or whatever you have with the people who are participating, that you get a final pass to say, oh, yeah, no, you can't. Yeah, we said that vampires couldn't fly. So yeah, unless he's got like a cape and is jumping off a cliff or a hang glider or something, he can't fly. You have to have an understanding up front that you have the ability to make changes to keep the canon solid. Otherwise, you do get those things, and it does throw everybody out. And that's where you get the 1-star reviews on Amazon that go, they blew it with this particular one. They blew it because they said this and then that. I mean, it's not like we're readers. We notice. It's not like other readers don't notice. So I think it kind of like everybody said it. At some point, you have to sort of say, here's what we're going to do and stick to it.
Yeah.
If I insanely ever decided to do a shared universe, everything would have to be edited by me before it went anywhere. Even if it was for someone else, I would have to read through everything and hopefully have everything in place already to know what's right and what isn't. It's hard enough to keep track of when it's my own work.
Yeah, because it's your universe, you're going to have to read through it. But that doesn't mean that you can't take somebody that knows your universe well and put them and bring them into the project, put them in charge of canon, so that they're doing the double check for consistency and bringing to you any issues that come up. Because the other thing is that if you like I said, I like to break rules, but you got to know how to do it right. And one of the ways of doing it right is, this is the rule, and now we're going to break it, but we're also going to hang a lampshade on it, because we're going to point out that we thought this was a rule and now we're finding something different. Our universe is changing and expanding. But you, as the owner of that universe, has to be willing to accept that change if you're going to let people do that.
And I think also it is very possible that you come upon a circumstance as the world builds out where somebody presents a possibility that you hadn't originally thought of. And then you do have to call it out in the story as well as in the series Bible and say, up until 1850, we thought this, but, starting in 1851 with that miraculous discovery, we found out, and, you've explained it to the reader so they don't think you made a mistake, which is also important, so they can follow the breadcrumbs. And I think that canon consistency is a piece that holds a lot of people back from considering creating a shared universe. I know there's one that I've talked to somebody about for about 5 years now, and every time we get to that point of, but you'd have to be the person in charge of the consistency, the eyes glaze and go, I can't, not right now. And it's a great idea, but I don't know if we'll ever get it off the ground because everybody's busy. And I know that scares me from even thinking about it. So it's definitely something to factor in, and probably factor more time than you thought you'd need if you're the world builder. Especially
yeah.
once it grows beyond 1 or 2 collaborators, you either have to have somebody helping you, or you have to allot a good bit of time for this, and maybe put off some other projects. So something to know up front rather than discover the hard way in the middle. Well, folks, we have already pretty much gone out of time. So let's go around and let everybody know where they can find you online. And if you've got a new book coming out or recently come out, let's hear about it. Jeannie?
You can find me at jeannieadams.com. You can find me at Jeannie Adams on Twitter, where I spend way too much time. I'm also at Jeannie Adams on Facebook and various other social media, Pinterest and whatever. You can also find me on Continual on YouTube and Facebook, which is the con that never ends. So my new release will come out in late June. It's called Deadly Discovery, and it's a straight suspense that's about DNA.
Cool. Doc?
I'm Doc Coleman. You can find me at, predictably, doccoleman.com. You can also find my published works by going to Amazon and searching for Doc Coleman Steampunk. If you don't add steampunk, you'll get lost in Doc Holiday and all kinds of Coleman camping equipment. So the latest thing I've got out was the Paradise Found anthology, which is now going away. There we go. And I'm currently working on the second of my Crackle and Bang novels, which is The Kindred of Kali. And I'm out there looking for sensitivity readers, and soon I hope to be bringing in beta readers. So the goal is to get it out by fall, but most likely it's going to be next year.
Okay, Danielle?
Danielle Ackley-McPhail. My website is under construction currently, but you can find me pretty much anywhere under Danielle Ackley-McPhail. There's only one of us. My newest collections are The Fox's Fire and The Kindly Ones.
Ooh, great cover.
Yeah.
Thank you. And for those that follow my writer's guides, we have Build a Book Workshop for those who want to lay out and design their own work. And 4 tips from the handyman, which isn't being cooperative.
Yep.
My newest novel is Dare's Devils, my military science fiction universe. And that should be coming out in November.
Cool.
I'm pretty easy to find online at gailzmartin.com or morganbryce.com. That's BRICE. And make sure you put the Z in for Martin. And all of my social media on Twitter, Facebook, etc. are versions of my name. I'm one of the con runners for Continual, which is the online ongoing multi-genre convention that never ends. So you can always find me over there. And I am a staff columnist for the Winchester Family Business blog, which is the largest fan blog for Supernatural and Walker, where I write episode reviews now for Walker and periodic Supernatural articles. And most of all, you can find me. Every month I also do a Dragon Con Supernatural Rewind panel where we are going season by season and talking through the panels. And right now we're up to the next season will be season 5. So always online, lots to find, lots of new stuff. Well, thank you so much to all of my wonderful, wonderful panelists. And thank you to everybody out there who is watching and listening. And thank you to the programming gods who saw fit to put us on this panel and are running Balticon because we love you and we love being here. So thank you so much for joining us, and stay tuned. There's a lot more great programming coming up all weekend long, and happy Memorial Day.
I have a reading at 2:30.
I have a reading at 2.
And I'm on Monday.
I have a reading at 7:30 and I'm on other panels today. So if you enjoyed us
Come
here,
find
find
us.
us there.